If you were hearing what Mike had to say, the cog, as I call him, talking about hands that serve. And it's interesting when you think about hands. This, of all the 4 classes, this is the one I would have wanted to teach, because hands and the idea, the concept of hands is it's just very interesting to me. And I want to talk a little bit about some facts about hands as we get started. Hands are formed on a little baby beginning at about 4 weeks. Now, they don't look like hands at that point. They look like little plates. But somehow, God has arranged that there are certain cells in those plates, those flat plates, that die. And where they die, it's between where the fingers would be separated. So those cells just kind of die and go away, and all of a sudden you've got 5 digits left on the hand. What was it David said in the 139th Psalm? I am fearfully and wonderfully made. And he goes on to talk in detail about how God knit him together inside his mother's womb and how all of his days were written in the book before he had even lived out one of those. So it's very interesting when you look at the science of how a human being is formed in its mother's womb. At least I think it is. Do you have any feeling in your fingernails? It might seem like we do, because if anything touches your fingernail, you can sense that. That's how sensitive our fingers are, and our fingertips especially. The nails actually have no nerve endings. But when you touch the nail, there are so many nerve endings under and around it that you have a sensation. You can feel shear pressure, and those guys in construction will know what shear pressure is. But if you take the edge of your nail and you push it against something, you can sense that shear pressure back in the cuticle area, because the cuticle area is where a lot of those nerve endings are. And nails are just a reorganized form of hair. I don't know if anybody else, did anybody else ever know that? Okay, you did. You knew that. I didn't know that until I read that in my research. And it kind of weirded me out. Really? That's hair? It's like hair. And then it made sense to me, because in one of my hobbies is archery, and I'll hunt turkeys in the spring, and if I get a turkey, or if I don't get a turkey, I'll ask the guys that do get turkeys if I can have the wings, and then I'll take the wing feathers and make fletching for my arrows. But as I cut the quill part of that turkey feather, it's very much like a fingernail. And in fact, it might be nearly the same essential carbon material. So it makes perfect sense to me. If you think about your palms are different from the rest of your hand. And this is another thing that's fascinating to me, not just the hands, but every other part of the body. How in the world does your body know to replicate the right kind of cells? Because our cells, the cells in our physical body, are dying even as we speak, some of us faster than others. And they're being replaced by living cells. But how does your body know to create a skin cell at your elbow that will make stretchy skin? Because you know your elbow skin is kind of stretchy, but it's not stretchy in other places. It's a different kind of skin at your elbow than at other places. And your palms. There's some significant things about your palms that make it different from the rest of your hand. It has its own fingerprints. If you look at your palm, and you can do that if you want to. I don't know if this is being recorded if you're being recorded on video, but it'll look great if people see the video and everybody's just staring at their hand. What are you all talking about in Bible class? Well, we were just staring at our hands. And there's no hair. You never have hair growing on the palm of your hand. There's no color. Even black people have no pigment in their palms. It's just flesh tone, like plain flesh without the pigment. And even though the skin of the palm is very tough and very durable, it's also very sensitive. You can touch things with your palm and have a sensation of what that item is like. You ever play that game where you have a box and you put your hands in it to find something and you have to identify it just by touch? We never think about doing that with our palm, but your palm is sensitive enough to do that. We normally do it with the fingers, but the palm will do it just as well. Your palm is also anchored to the internal structure of your hand in a way that the rest of your flesh is not, because the palm has to be stationary. When you grasp something and you turn or you twist, you put torque on it, your palm doesn't slide around like other parts of your body might if it was put under the same kind of stress. So your palm is really ingeniously designed, just as that specific part of your hand. So that's just a little bit about the hand and about the palm. But of course, your hand, like every other part of your body, is operated by the brain. The brain has a motor cortex. And that motor cortex takes care of every movement the body makes. But it was surprising to me to find that 25% of the motor cortex that controls movement of the body is committed almost totally to the movement of the hand and fingers. 25%. That seems like a pretty large percentage of that motor cortex just for the hands. But then if you stop and think about it, what kind of things can the hands do? What do you do with your hands? Women sew. That's a pretty specific and technical, especially if you're sewing by hand. Practice. What else? Write. You write. And think about when you were a child learning to write. How difficult was it to make your first letters? All you have to do is go home and look on the refrigerators of parents with young children, and you'll see some of those letters almost all the time. And they look like, okay, what is that? I'm not quite sure. Because you're getting those motor skills down. But that's something else that God has designed the body to do. The more we practice something, the more we become adept at it. And we talk about muscle memory. You ever heard that term? Muscle memory, where you work your muscles a certain way so much that they just learn to do that. How many of you, and this might seem like a crazy question, but how many of you type? Maybe a better question would be, how many of you took typing in high school or in college? Okay, yeah, a lot of people. Good, good. Didn't it fascinate you when you went into college or went into class the first day and it's like, I'll never get the hang of this. You know, there's all these letters out there. And I've only got so many fingers. But the more you practice, and what your teachers do in typing classes is they give you A, B, 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 colon, 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 and you just type that. It doesn't seem to make any sense at all, but all you're doing is training your muscles to work. And think about all the coordination that a human being has to have to type maybe 50 words a minute, and that's not a high rate, just 50 words. And research shows that you can type keys even faster if they alternate between the right and left hand. In other words, if you're typing two letters or symbols that you have to type immediately in succession with the same hand, you can't do that as fast as if you type with the left and then with the right, or with the right and then with the left. It's faster to do it from one hand to the other. It really is astounding what we are capable of doing with our hands. Think about a concert pianist or some of these guys that play guitar or banjo. And I don't know if you're one of those people who has musical abilities. We've got people in this congregation with great musical abilities. I don't. So I'm in awe of people who can do that, and they don't even look. You know, it's like if I was doing it, I'd have to do this or do that, and other people play and they look around. And it's just like second nature. There's so much coordination between the hands and the mind. It's astonishing. Now, let's talk about another aspect of the concept of hands. How many words or phrases do we have in our English vernacular that have to do with the hand? I've got a list here. See how many of them you can get. Oop, I'm on the wrong list. I've got two lists. All right? Let me give you an example. If I say, give him a hand. Okay, that means, is that all it means? It also means help. Now, it means applause. If I give him a hand, well, yeah. Oh, no, that's not what we mean. And isn't that the joke? Hey, I need a hand over here. And everybody goes, no, that's not what he means. And we know that's what he means. We're making a play on words. What other uses of the the concept of hand do we have in English? Handy. If somebody is handy, and why do we have that term, handy? What's that? They're good with their hands. Yes. What? They're readily available. Where are your hands? Boy, they're just right there. What if your hands were coming out of your elbows? Yeah, really? He should know. What other terms? Because I know if I just throw some of these out, you go, oh, yeah, that's what. Yes, sign language to the deaf, but not only to the deaf, because we have that. Does anybody know the official universal sign language? Did anybody study that? There's this show on TV, yes. It's this lady named Rachel, and she's got a program that teaches children sign language. It's a really neat show. And she came up with this idea because her little daughter was born deaf. And so they learned sign language, and she thought, wouldn't it be great to teach other children how to communicate with children who were deaf? And it's a wonderful show. What is it called? Rachel something, I think. Anyway. Signing Time, that's it, yeah, Signing Time. It's a great show. I enjoy watching it if Liam is there, because I watch Liam enjoy the show. But how many of us use unofficial sign language? And I'm not talking about the bad stuff. Yes. Yeah. Hey, what's this mean? It means hustle, hustle, hustle. What else does it mean? Yeah, get your attention. It means, and I'm trying to think, what was that? It means a lot of things. What are some other sign languages that we use? Thumbs up. Good job, guys. That's right. And if you've noticed, all the while I've been talking, I've been using gestures. And it's like, what does that mean to do that? But if somebody just stood up here and talked to you, as a matter of fact, I won't forget, I don't know who the girl was, but when I was a young child, a lady performed a song, and I don't even remember what the song was. But I just remember when she was singing this song that it was beautiful, and she just stood there like this the whole time she sang. Because most people, when they sing, they do things with their hands. But this lady just stood there. And I thought, that's really neat. Bud.
Hawaii.
Right.
You know, when they do the hula and the dances.
What are they doing?
It's actually words.
Yes, it's words. They're communicating a message. I have no idea what they're saying. And they usually tell you. We went over there years ago and sat at a luau, and they say, here's what the song means. And then, licky, licky, locky, locky. And I said, give me more porky, porky. So now, think about that. But what about Irish step dancers? See, the notable thing about Hawaiian dancers is they use their hands and tell a story. What's the notable thing about Irish step dancers? They don't use their hands at all. They just keep them down to the sides. And aren't they amazing to watch? I like to watch them both. But the interesting thing now is, much of that focuses around the hands, either the use of the hands or the intentional neglect of the use of the hands. So, absolutely. What's that?
A lot of this was covered by Solomon when he said he points with his finger.
Yes. And in another place, he talks about points with his feet, winks with his eye. Signs that we use with our body language, but specifically with the hand. And there's the salute.
Sam that shed innocent blood, that's getting over the negative end.
That's right.
But that's the power of that.
And that's the concept, though, of the hand in the first place. If we talk about, well, it's in his hands now, what's that mean? I mean, it's your choice. It's your control. It's up to you. And we talk about God in that respect, but sometimes it's in our hands. It's my choice. It's your choice. But it's in our hands. Because God has given us our hands with which to do things. But
you know, in the Bible where it said that they said they washed their hands of this. You know,
yes.
They would literally wash their hands, but it was a symbol.
Right.
that they weren't going to have anything to do with it.
Now, who do you think of when we talk about somebody washing their hands in a situation? Think about Pilate, but who else washed their hands in a different context? And Jesus was called on the carpet for it.
Before they ate.
What's that? Yes, they washed their hands. Why did they wash their hands before they ate?
They were walking and had a walker. They were picking corn, I think.
Oh, okay. No, not why didn't they wash, but why did the Pharisees wash their hands? Were they, what's the word I'm looking for? Were they hygiene freaks?
Germaphobes.
They were what? Germaphobes, yeah. They thought,
That was part of the law.
yes, if you don't wash your hands before you eat, you're going to be defiled. What did Jesus say about that? He said it's not what goes in, it's what comes out of your mouth, because what comes out of your mouth starts in the heart. Now, and we might, wait a minute, we've gotten away from the hands. No, we haven't really, because
One hand is used for eating and the other hand is used for other purposes.
yes, that's right. And we're going to leave that alone. But it's true. It's absolutely true. And we'll get into this later, Lord willing. What did Paul say about hands and prayer? What does he want men to do everywhere? Lift up holy hands. So when we're talking about Jesus not washing his hands and being called on the carpet for that, and he says it's not what goes into your mouth, what you eat with your hands and then it goes into your mouth that defiles you, it's what comes out of your mouth. And then he inspired Paul to write to Timothy, I want men to pray everywhere, lifting up holy hands. What's the idea of holy hands? How can you have holy hands? You don't do evil. You commit yourself to the Lord and you refrain from evil. And if you do evil, you repent and you're forgiven and you're restored to your holy condition. Any of you own horses? How do you measure a horse's height? By the hands. About 4 inches. So if you say that horse is 16 hands, oh man, I got to do the math. How about 4 times 16? No, if you're familiar, you'll know.
When you're talking about hands, they get cheated in a bakery because they all work. Given to the knees, knead the dough.
The hands need
Not enough bakers here to understand that.
I guess not.
You knead the dough with your hands, but the knees get the credit.
And you need
Too far out.
Over your head.
It's way over my head. I can't even see it up there. It's so far. Bill, you're going to have to explain that to me later.
I look at the other one, it's sea legs.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Few people in the world have sea legs. You learn to walk on a ship when it's rocking.
Oh, are you talking about kneading the dough on the ship? Oh, okay. I wasn't putting it in the context of Navy bread. I should have. Those are not all of the ideas of the hand, but that's probably a sufficient number. I want us to look at some passages from the Old Testament. Oh, one other thing I'll mention about use of the hands before we get into these passages is, if someone is blind, how do they tell what you look like? They put their hands on your face, and they can tell by touching you what you look like. They get some sense of that. That would be, I've never had that happen to me yet. Has anyone had that happen? You have? Okay.
I had a blind friend that he could even tell you if it was a 1, a 5, or a 20, or a 10. He was good.
Really?
He could feel the money.
Oh, the money. I thought you were talking about the face. I thought he'd feel you. Oh, man, you're the one, bud.
He could literally feel your face.
Wow.
He usually just went like this. I mean, it didn't feel all over your face, but usually you felt your hair because evidently it was the thickness or the lack
Right.
of hair. It told him who you were.
And when we use our hands, those of us that have good sight, we keep our eyes open normally when we use our hands. But think about it for a minute. If I gave you a piece of string, could you close your eyes and tie a knot in it? Well, you probably could. And if you're familiar with certain kinds of knots, you could probably tie a particular kind of knot with your eyes closed, or even behind your back. I thought about cutting off a bunch of string and bringing it in, letting everybody try that. But you do that when you go home tonight. We won't do that in class. I figured Gail would have to clean up most of it, so didn't bring any string. But there's so many things that we do with our hands. We really get a lot done, and hopefully it's positive. Let's look in Leviticus chapter 16. Oh my goodness, I meant to hit my stopwatch so I would tell how long I had talked.
We'll let you know.
Yeah, you'll let me know. When Donnie falls asleep, I'll know it's cookie time. What did I say, Leviticus 16? What's under consideration in Leviticus 16 is the Day of Atonement. That was a day, one day out of the year, on which the high priest would go 3 times into the Holy of Holies. But after he had done that, this is what we read that he would do or have done in verses 20 through 22. When he finishes atoning for the holy place and the tent of meeting and the altar, he shall offer the live goat. And then Aaron shall lay both of his hands on the head of the live goat and confess over it all the iniquities of the sons of Israel and all their transgressions in regard to all their sins. And he shall lay them on the head of the goat and send it away into the wilderness by the hand of a man who stands in readiness. What are we reading about hands here? Are you familiar with the concept of a scapegoat? They chose a bull to offer as the atoning sacrifice, but they also chose 2 goats. One bull to be offered on the altar in a burnt offering, and another bull to be, or another goat. Did I say goat that last time? There's a bull and 2 goats, if I didn't say that right. And the second goat is the scapegoat, and this is what he does with the scapegoat. What does he do with the scapegoat? Physically. He takes it, separates it, puts his hands on the goat where? On the goat's head. And then what does he do? He confesses the sins of the people. I have no idea why God had him to do it that way. But to me, I understand it to be a transference. He's putting his hands on that animal. He could have stood back. God, just stand 10 feet away from him because that thing's going to be covered with sin in just a minute. But what he said is you put your both hands, not one hand, not a finger, both hands. You grab that goat by the head. You confess the sins of the people. And then what does he do with the goat? He gives it over into the hand, which we're talking about the concept of power and authority and ability and responsibility, all those things. Gives it into the hand of another man who stands in readiness. And that guy does what? He takes that goat out into the wilderness and he turns it loose. Now the symbology seems pretty clear to me that the laying on of that high priest's hands after he's atoned for himself and the people signifies the sins going to that goat, and the goat goes to the wilderness and the sins are gone. As David would later write, as far as east is from west, so far has he removed my sins from me. So we've got this aspect of this laying on of hands for the Day of Atonement. But then there's Deuteronomy 15. A completely different idea about the hands. In Deuteronomy 15, we're talking about the sabbatic year. The sabbatic year was a year when you would release everyone who was in debt to you. And if you were in debt to someone else, they would release you from your debt. Verse 7, Deuteronomy 15:7. If there is a poor man with you, one of your brothers in any of your towns in your land, which the Lord your God is giving you, you shall not harden your heart, nor close your hand from your poor brother, but you shall freely open your hand to him, and shall generously lend him sufficient for his need in whatever he lacks. Beware that there is no base thought in your heart, saying, the 7th year, the year of remission is near, and your eye is hostile toward your poor brother, and you give him nothing. And then he may cry to the Lord against you, and it will be a sin to you. You shall generously give to him, and your heart shall not be grieved when you give to him, because for this thing the Lord God will bless you in all your work and in all your undertakings. For the poor will never cease to be in the land. Therefore I command you, saying, you shall freely open your hand to your brother, to your needy and poor in your land. What do you think about that? What's the idea of an open hand? What's the idea of a closed hand? I'm going to control what I've got, and I'm only going to pull something out of there and give it to you. And God says, the idea is you've got your belongings in your hand, and you give to your needy brother with an open hand. You're generous towards him. You don't hold back. And he even says, this is how I want you to feel about it in this context. Don't you say in your heart that I don't want to do this. Just do it. Do it in faith. And there might be a sense, well, I don't want to do this for my brother because he's a jerk. But God's not a jerk, is he? Do it for God. If you can't do it for your brother in good conscience, do it for God. Sarah.
When you're not the owner of it, it's a lot easier to let it go.
Oh boy.
Then we don't have to worry about holding on to things.
What an idea. If you consider all that you own as being from God's, and God, from his bountiful hand, has open-handedly blessed you, then it's so much easier to open-handedly bless others. And what God is saying in this is, I'm not going to let you fail through giving to your brother. If you give generously to your brother, I'm not going to stand back and let you fall on your face financially or food-wise or in any way, shape, or form. I'm going to provide for you. This is not the health and wealth gospel. What this is God saying, you take care of people. You love and treat them the way I want you to, with generosity and compassion and did I say generosity? Don't say it again, because I think that's the whole point. Then I'm going to be generous to you. I'm going to have compassion towards you. Proverbs says, when you give to the poor, you lend to the Lord. That's the only way I know that we can put God in our debt. And that's what he tells us in Proverbs. When you open your hand to the poor, I'm going to be indebted to you. You're lending to me. And how do you think God's going to repay? See, I'm embarrassed about things I've borrowed in the past because I'll forget about them. 6 months later, I'm in my garage. Oh, there's that thing I borrowed from so-and-so, and I never got it back to them. Matter of fact, if any of you are missing anything, call me, because I might have it in my garage. Now, one time it worked out really good in my favor. I had this blue dolly, not a play dolly, but a thing you move heavy things with, in my garage. It's a blue dolly. And I thought it belonged to my brother-in-law. I was just certain that he had brought it over and left it. And I called him and I said, hey, your dolly's over here. What dolly? I said, that blue dolly. You brought that stuff over and you left. I said, I don't have any blue dolly. Okay, now it's mine. So, all right. I'll give it back to you with an open hand. This is a great lesson. And I don't think any of us would do well to say in ourselves, well, this is Old Testament. We don't need to do that anymore. How pleased do you think the Lord would be if he understands we look at this and say, well, God wanted them to be really generous. I think I'm going to be really generous like that. I really believe God will do the same kind of thing for us today that he was promising to do for them then. I don't think I'm speaking out of turn there. Psalm 19, what does it say? The first verse of Psalm 19. Anybody remember that? The heavens do what? They declare the glory of God. And what's the next line? The firmament shows his handiwork. Some translations even have, the firmament shows the work of his hands. And I don't know if we're to understand that God literally used his hands to do anything, but that's the way he's presenting it for us. That this is his handiwork, the work of his hands. I read that, and I think about what it's like to go outside on a glorious spring day or summer day or winter day or fall day, to look up into the sky and see the clouds and see the expanse and the greatness of this universe. And the very fact that we live on a planet from which we can see through our atmosphere to what else is out there. We typically don't think about that, but on most heavenly bodies flying around in space, which they're not flying around in space, everything is functioning in its order. That's why we're not bumping into everything. But on most heavenly bodies, the atmosphere is so dense and thick that if you were there, you couldn't see through it. But not us. Our atmosphere is such that we can see through it. And our view of the rest of the universe is from a standpoint where we have clarity of vision. We can take telescopes and see way out there. And we can't see so far that there's a wall blocking it. We're constantly looking into open space. Very few other heavenly bodies have that kind of a vantage point, but we do. And so we can look up into the sky and we can see the work of God's hands. And it should cause us to reflect, all right, what's the work of my hands? What has Marty Kessler done with his hands? And I'm not talking about that grass hut that I built back in the teen room for the puppet show. Now that's the work of my hands. I'm not boasting about it. As a matter of fact, if you go back and look at it, I'm glad it's not anything that anybody has to live in. But I'm talking about our lives. Because what we do with our lives is our handiwork. The impact that you have on your family members, the impact that you have on people you work with, the impact you have on everybody who knows you and knows about you, that is the work of our hands. And thinking about looking at God's handiwork ought to cause us to reflect on the work of our hands as well. Psalm 31:5. Who will get that and read it for us? Psalm 31:5. Several of you are going to it. Somebody's got to read it. What's that, 31?
Into my hand I commit my spirit, you have redeemed me, O Lord, faithful God.
Okay. Read it again, Donnie.
Into your hand I commit my spirit, you have redeemed me, O Lord, faithful God.
Are you reading from the Gospels, from the crucifixion? Isn't that one of the things Jesus said from the cross? Into your hands I commit my spirit. Where's he getting that? He's getting it from the Psalms. Into God's hand, into his power, into his control, into his authority. Back to him, Jesus says, I commit my spirit. It was first written in the Psalms. Jesus knew the Psalms. He's the incarnate Word of God. And so when he uses a text of Scripture, it's perfectly applied. And I think there's another example right there, how powerful this message can come down to us today if we would simply commit our lives into the hands of God. I don't know about you, but when things happen and I'm provoked to prayer, just like Abraham Lincoln talked about being driven to his knees by the need to pray, by the things that he was being weighed down with, I don't know what to pray for. And I'm not ashamed to admit that, because that's what the Holy Spirit inspired Paul to write to the Romans. We don't know what to pray for as we ought. So what does God do for us according to Romans 8? He gives us his Spirit to intercede for us. And so when Jesus says he commits himself into the hands of God, we can commit ourselves into the hands of God when we pray and not have to know everything to ask for. Just tell him, Lord, here's a situation. I don't know what to do with it, but I know you do. I'm confused. You're not confused. I don't know what to say. I don't know what to desire, but you know what I need, and so I'm coming to you. And to me, that's, if my children did that, and they do, they'll come, Dad, I got this problem. What do you think I should do? Isn't it frustrating when you're talking to somebody and it's, hey, I need some advice. Here's what I think I should do. Don't you think I should do that? Great, thanks. I'll see you later. And there are some people, really, they call me. They come in and they do that. And it's like, well, that was an easy counsel. I didn't have to say a word. They came in, they had the question, they also had the answer, they left, they were happy. And I hope we don't treat the Lord like that. I don't think we do. I think we're trying to pattern ourselves after Jesus in this very same way. Proverbs chapter 4. And I confess I have no idea how long we've been talking. Let me see what the time is here. It's been 35 minutes? Oh man, I must be having fun because it doesn't seem like this. Okay. Tell you what, let's go to 7 o'clock if I don't forget. 7 o'clock, and well, let's finish up a couple points. That's what we'll do. We'll finish up this point, and then we'll go eat some cookies. Proverbs 4, 1-5. Who's got that, and we'll read it for us? Anybody?
To a father's instruction, pay attention and gain understanding. I give you sound learning, so do not forsake my teaching. For I too was a son to my father, still tender and cherished by my mother. Then he taught me, and he said to me, take hold of my words with all your heart. Keep my commands, and you will live. Get wisdom, get understanding. Do not forget my words or turn away from them.
Who is it that's almost certainly writing this down? Wouldn't it be Solomon? That's who I think it is. What is he telling his son?
Basically, to understand what I'm telling you and to heed my instructions.
Absolutely. Where does he tell his son that he got this? From his father. Who was Solomon's father? David. David was Solomon's father. Solomon sets his son down. I don't know which son. He had 1,000 women. Do you realize how many mothers-in-law that means? Now, see, I think that's great because I got a wonderful mother-in-law. But I've known some people that haven't. My goodness. It's like, no, I won't even go there. She's not here, is she? They do. They're just like stepmothers in the fairy tales. It's always the evil stepmother. And I'm thinking, wait a minute. Stepmothers are the ones who take these children on when they're not their own, and they love them like they're... Anyway, I'm not... Don't you get me off into that now. But here's Solomon talking to his son, saying, I learned this stuff from my dad. I want you to acquire this and hold on to it and do it. I got it from my dad. It's good stuff. And his dad was David. David ever say anything about his hands? Go to Psalm 144, and somebody read the first verse of Psalm 144.
Lord, my strength, which teacheth my hands to war and my fingers to fight.
Wow, that's pretty specific. What does David thank God for? Teaching his fingers to war and his hands to fight. Was David a soldier? Absolutely. He stood up to Goliath, saved the day. All that was about faith and what David was doing with his hands. Bud?
My father used to say, I'm going to give you the back of my hand.
Yeah.
Now, do we understand that?
I think we understand that. That's another notable expression regarding the hand right there. Now go to Psalm 18 rather. And read with me starting at verse 34. Whoops, I missed. not 34, start reading at verse 20, or just read verse 20 with me. The Lord has rewarded me according to my righteousness, according to the cleanness of my hands, he has recompensed me. And then verse 24, therefore the Lord has recompensed me according to my righteousness, according to the cleanness of my hands in his eyes. Now verse 34, he trains my hands for battle so that my arms can bend a bow of bronze. You have also given me the shield of your salvation, and your right hand upholds me. So David's talking about his hand. It's clean. He stated that twice, and yet God has trained his hand for battle, and God has upheld his hands with his own hands. Your gentleness makes me great. You enlarge my steps under me, and my feet have not slipped. I pursued my enemies and overtook them. I did not turn back until they were consumed. I shattered them so that they were not able to rise. They fell under my feet, for you have girded me with strength for battle. You've subdued me under those who rose up against me. You've also made my enemies turn their backs to me. I destroyed them who hated me. They cried for help, but there was none to save, even to the Lord, but he did not answer them. I beat them fine as the dust before the wind. I emptied them out as the mire of the streets. Wow. Is God love? Is he also justice? What is it that Paul wrote about the goodness and the severity of God? And we would say, as David says here, both are in his hand. Both are in his power. He puts choice in our hands, and we have the power to choose life or death. And he sets those choices before us. And we talk about that being in our hands. And God is saying through his servant, through his prophet David, I'm clean in your eyes, but I'm a man of war. Now you might remember why it was that God did not allow David to build the temple. Why was it? He shed a lot of blood. Now, did that make David unclean? No. If I'm going to slice a cake to serve to you, where do you want me to get the knife? Out of the kitchen drawer or out of my hunting locker? Now, is there anything wrong with a knife in the hunting locker? Not a thing. It's got its own use. It's got its own purpose. That's why it's in the hunting locker. But that's not the one you would choose to slice a cake that you're going to feed to somebody. And that's the way it was with David. God, one of the reasons God selected him and used him was that he was a man of war. And he used his hands. What did David do with his hands? Slung stones. What else did he do? What got him in Saul's court in the first place? Do what? He played the harp. He played the lyre. Something. Not liar like telling falsehoods, but so he used his hands, and his hands put him in the right place. All this stuff is very fascinating. I don't know about you, but this just, I love it. When we come back, there's two passages I want to go over. What I wanted to do when we come back is talk about things the New Testament says about hands, and we're going to wind up with seven things God teaches us in the New Testament to do with our hands. So let's take a cookie break and come back in 15 or so. Now I'll set my timer.